Adana's heart raced as she imagined the brutality of that moment, the injustice that seemed to hang in the air, and the silence that must have screamed louder than words. Ohu's entire lineage had been cursed, condemned to forever bear the stain of slavery and disgrace. Even the cleansing ritual, later performed by one of Ohu's descendants after much wealth was gained, could not wipe away the past. In the lands of Umumbada, where the tall palm trees swayed and the earth was rich with life, the people believed that not all things seen under the sun were of the world. Spirits walked among them. They said, restless, watching, and waiting. The elders spoke in whispers about spirit children, born between realms, neither fully of the living nor of the dead. Pregnant women were told to stay inside during the heat of the day, for it was then that these spirits wandered most freely, seeking those who carried life. It was a tale passed down from mother to daughter, carried in the winds of time. And yet, as with all ancient stories, some believed, while others dismissed them as mere warnings, old superstition told to frighten the easily swayed. Adana had never been one to give much thought to such tales, but today something was different. Adana hurried along the dusty road, her steps quickened by an uneasy feeling that crawled over her skin like the brush of cold fingers. She regretted going to the market, wishing she had stayed home as her mother had warned her so many times before. Each time she glanced back, the hairs on the back of her neck stand as she heard the faint sounds of footsteps, yet no one was there. Her heart began to race, the heavy thud of her pulse a steady drumbeat of fear. She recalled the stories, the warnings about spirit children haunting pregnant women who wandered outside when the sun was high. Were they just old tales, or was there truth hidden in them? I could have just looked through my garden, she muttered to herself, regret forming a lump in her throat. Surely there would be something there to prepare for my husband and me tonight. But here she was, her basket light in her hand and her belly swollen with new life, walking along a desolate road as the sun blazed high above her head. She quickened her pace as much as her big tummy would allow, the ground beneath her feet kicking up small clouds of dust. Relief flooded her when she looked up and saw her neighbor Amara walking towards her. Amara, she called, her voice laced with desperation. Amara turned at the sound, her brow furrowed in concern as she saw Adana's state. She waited for her to catch up, shielding her eyes from the sun. Adana, what are you doing out in this heat? In your condition? Adana, grateful for the company, explained between breaths. My husband is at the farm, and there was no one else to go to the market. Amara frowned. But I saw Nena, your husband's brother's wife, at the market with your mother-in-law's servant. Couldn't you have asked them to help? Adana waved her hand dismissively. Ah, Amara, you know how they are. It's better to do things myself than to endure the complaints and trouble they would cause. Let's just go home. This heat is unbearable. Amara nodded knowingly. I understand, she said under her breath. They began walking together, the conversation a distraction from the oppressive heat. As they neared the village, Amara suddenly said, Adana, from now on, let me help you with your market trips. You don't need to do everything alone, not in your condition. Adana stopped in her tracks, her eyes wide with surprise. She stared at Amara as if trying to process the kindness being offered. For a moment, she was lost in thought, taken aback by the sudden wave of emotion that hit her. Amara, noticing Adana had stopped, turned back and rushed to her side. Adana, what is wrong? Are you in pain? Is it the baby? Panic set in as she glanced at Adana's swollen belly, fearing her water had broken. No, I'm fine, Adana finally managed to say, her voice trembling. She dropped her market basket and tried to embrace Amara with her protruding stomach, tears streaming down her face. Amara, startled at first, stood stiffly, unsure of what to do. Adana, it's okay, don't cry. It's just the market. She patted her on the back, trying to calm her down. As the tears subsided, Adana pulled back, wiping her face. I don't know how to thank you, Amara. No one has ever offered to help me like this. I was so overwhelmed. Eh? Is that why you nearly sent me to my ancestors with fear? Amara laughed, her voice bright and full of warmth. I thought your time had come, and I was about to start screaming for help. You scared me. Her laughter was so infectious that soon Adana found herself laughing too, the tension dissolving between them. Once the laughter died down, Amara's tone became serious. Listen, Adana, I know the kind of people your mother in law and her children are. The envy and malice they hold in their hearts are no secret. You've seen it for yourself, haven't you? Amara's voice dropped, her gaze steady. You must be wise in how you deal with them. Protect yourself and your child, and know that you don't have to face everything alone. Adana nodded, feeling the weight of Amara's words. The truth was something she had known for a long time, but hearing it spoken aloud made it real. She had always been careful around her in laws, knowing how quickly kindness could turn to venom. But now, with a child on the way, the stakes felt even higher. Thank you, Adana said quietly. I'll be careful. As they continued walking, the village came into view, and Adana felt a sense of comfort she hadn't expected. It wasn't just the thought of home, but the knowledge that someone had her back. In a world where women like her had to constantly watch their steps, Amara's friendship was a rare gift. As the days passed, Amara kept her promise. She helped Adana with the market errands, visited often, and even brought food when Adana felt too tired to cook. Together, they navigated the complexities of the village life. Amara's wisdom and humor balancing Adana's cautious nature. Though the spirits of the midday sun had once haunted her thoughts, Adana now felt a different kind of protection, one born not from superstition, but from the strength of sisterhood. As Adana lay on her bed, reflecting on the day's events, Amara's words of kindness echoed softly in her heart. She felt a wave of gratitude wash over her, grateful for the opportunity to rewrite the narrative of her interactions with this generous woman. It was hard not to think back on the past and how differently she had treated Amara and her family. The Okolis, Adana had once been so easily swayed by the gossip and slander whispered by her husband's family. She recalled how her mother-in-law and sister-in-law had filled her ears with toxic stories about the Okoli family, branding them as troublemakers, accusing them of being cursed, and warning her not to trust them. At first, Adana had believed every word. She had embraced the hostility without hesitation, never questioning the stories. She swallowed them to shape her perception, distancing herself from the Okolis without even knowing who they truly were. There had been warnings, small hints that she was being manipulated, but she ignored them. One of her husband's sister, Chinwe, had once pulled her aside. Adana, be careful, she had whispered. Not everything our mother says is the truth. The Okolis aren't what she claims. But back then, Adana had been too caught up in the praise and attention from her in-laws. She had reveled in being part of their inner circle, blind to the fact that their sweetness was like honey hiding sharp unseen barbs. Chinwe's words fell on deaf ears, lost in the allure of her newly-found family's affection. It wasn't long before the cracks began to show. The change was subtle at first. A sly comment here, a condescending look there. Adana ignored the early signs, dismissing them as misunderstanding or harmless remarks. But as time passed, the signs became impossible to ignore. She started noticing how her mother-in-law Nkechi and the other members of the family would openly criticize her husband Kenechi, in front of her. He's always acting different, they would say. He doesn't know how to follow family tradition. Their disdain for him seemed to grow, and it became harder to brush it off. The turning point came when Adana decided to confront Nkechi. She had hoped for clarity, for understanding. Instead, her mother in law unleashed a storm of accusation. Ungrateful girl, you think you are better than us now? You've turned Kelechi against his family, haven't you? Nkechi's words were like daggers, and Adana realized with painful clarity that the family she had thought she was part of had never truly accepted her. In the aftermath of that confrontation, Adana began to see things differently. She realized how the Okolis, particularly Amara, had once tried to extend a hand of friendship. She remembered how Amara had greeted her with warmth, how she had offered to help in small but meaningful ways. But back then, Adana had been blinded by the lies her mother in laws had fed her. She had pushed Amara away, allowing her prejudice to build an unnecessary wall. Now, as she lay on her bed, she was struck with regret. She had wronged the Okolis, people who had done nothing but show kindness, and she had allowed herself to be swept up in her in law's manipulation. It wasn't easy to admit, but the realization settled heavily in her heart. But with the regret came a new determination. Adana had learned a powerful lesson. Never again would she let others dictate her perception or choices. She would form her own opinions, see people for who they truly were, and make her own path. And perhaps, she thought as her eyes fluttered shut, it wasn't too late to make things right. Amara's offer of help today had shown her that bridges, even the ones she had burned, could still be rebuilt. All it required was humility and the courage to seek forgiveness. With that comforting thought, Adana sighed in relief, feeling a sense of peace she hadn't experienced in a long time. As sleep overtook her, she whispered a silent prayer, thankful for second chances, for true friendship, and for the strength to face the days ahead. The next day, as Adana returned from her garden, her hands full of freshly harvested vegetables, she made her way into her hut. She was exhausted from the heat and the weight of her pregnancy. She longed to change out of her rough, dusty clothes into something lighter and more comfortable. Just as she was about to undress, she heard her name called from outside. Sighing, she stepped back into the sun, squinting against the harsh light. There, standing with an impatient and hostile expression, was Ijoma, her sister-in-law. Adana greeted her, though Ijoma didn't make any attempt to respond. Instead, she hissed, eyes narrowing as she spoke. Mama wants to see you in her hut now, pretender. She spat the last word, then turned on her heel and walked away, her hips weighing with the confidence of someone who knew they were stirring trouble. Adana stood there, sorely tempted to ignore the summons. Every muscle in her body ached, and her swollen feet screamed for rest. She had either the energy or the will to deal with her mother in law's antics, especially in this heat, but she knew better. Defying that call would lead to a storm of conflict, one that would land on her husband's shoulders. The last thing she wanted was to make life more difficult for him, who already bore the weight of his family's resentment. Reluctantly, Adana went back inside, took some water from the clay pot, and went to cool her body first. Her mother in law can give her that much time to at least not faint on the way. After pouring the cool water, she regained some strength and tying a clean wrapper, she headed toward her mother in law's hut with a heavy heart. Each step felt like a small act of punishment, though the distance wasn't too far. In her condition, it felt like an endless journey. Their home, built away from the main compound, was meant to give them peace, a buffer from the constant tension that brewed among Keleshi's brothers. Yet, even the distance couldn't keep the troubles away. As she walked, Adana's mind wandered back to the day her husband had explained the family's deep resentment toward him. It all centered around land, a precious portion with a prized over African oil bean. an Oji kola nut tree. The land had been gifted to Kelechi by his late grandmother in what had been a shocking and unexpected twist. Just before her death, the old woman had summoned the family and made her wishes known. She had declared that the portion of land with its valuable trees would go to Kelechi. My husband gave me this land, she had said, her voice strong despite her frail body, and I am giving it to Kelechi, my grandson. If anyone tries to take it from him, let them know that they will bring calamity upon their own heads and their children's. The proclamation had stunned everyone. The tradition was for the land to go to the youngest son, not a grandson. But the elder woman's wishes were final. No one could contest it. And that seemed to have increased the bitterness that followed. Kelechi had tried to avoid further conflict by distancing himself from the main family compound. With the help of his friends and age grade, he had cleared a portion of the land away from the homestead and built his own house. It was on that land that he had prepared a home for Adana before he came to ask for her hand in marriage. Yet, even with that effort, peace was elusive. The family's bitterness remained, festering like an unhealed wound. As Adana neared her mother in law's hut, she couldn't shake the feeling that today's summon was simply another ploy to make her life difficult. Especially now, in the final stages of her pregnancy, when walking was a painful effort and even small tasks felt very difficult. She wished for her father in law to return soon. His presence was the only thing that occasionally tempered the family's hostility. But with him away, the balance had tipped in her mother in law's favor. Her thoughts were interrupted as she reached the hut and saw Nkechi step outside, arms crossed over her chest, her lips pressed into a thin line. "Are you going to stand there all day, or will you come inside?" she asked, her tone sharp, before turning and walking back into the darkened interior of the hut, ignoring Adana's respectful greeting. Swallowing her frustration, Adana followed her inside. The air was thick with tension. Inside the dimly lit hut, she could feel the weight of Nkechi's gaze, heavy with disdain. The older woman sat down, staring at her daughter-in-law with a mixture of uncertainty and something else, something that resembled contempt. There was always an undercurrent of unresolved conflict between them, a tension that neither could openly address without tearing the delicate thread that held the family together. "Sit," Nkechi commanded again, her sharp tone slicing through the humid air, the silence almost suffocating. Adana obeyed immediately, lowering herself carefully onto a worn wooden stool. Her heart was racing so fast that she wondered briefly why it hadn't burst out of her chest by now. But as she sat, something strange happened. Nkechi's hardened expression softened slightly, though the lines of worry and tension etched on her face remained. "You carry my grandchild," she began, her voice tinged with a rare hint of vulnerability. "And for that, I have decided to give you a word of advice." Adana's heart fluttered with uncertainty. She had grown so accustomed to her mother-in-law's indifference that this shift in tone left her unsettled. What was she really trying to say? She couldn't tell, but she knew better than not to interrupt. "I have summoned you not out of malice, but out of concern," Nkechi continued, though her voice wavered slightly, betraying the struggle beneath the surface. "There are things you must know, things that have been kept hidden for far too long." Adana felt her stomach turn. Whatever was coming, it wasn't going to be good. She could already feel the weight of it pressing down on her. Her mother-in-law was really so solemn. She remained silent, waiting for the elder woman to continue, sensing that this was not a moment for rash words. "My daughter," Nkechi said after a long pause, her voice carrying the weight of old wisdom. "Our people say, what an elder sees while sitting, even if a child climbs the highest Iroko tree, they will never see it. That is why a child must be guided while walking on a slippery road." Adana nodded, her mind racing. "Yes, Mama, that's true." Nkechi nodded in return, as if that was exactly the response she had been waiting for. Her eyes took on a distant, haunted look as she continued. The reason I have been trying to keep you away from the Okoli family, there is something I doubt your husband has told you. Adana's breath caught in her throat. The Okolis, this again? It seemed like every day there was a new reason why her mother in law despised that family. But she stayed silent, her pulse quickening with curiosity. What could be so terrible? When I was married new in this family, Nkechi began, her voice lowering to almost a whisper. Your husband's grandmother, Nneka, told me a story, one that was passed down from her own mother in law. It concerns the Okoli family and why we can never truly accept them. Adana felt her heart sink into her stomach. She wasn't sure she wanted to hear this, but she had no choice now. The Okoli family, Nkechi said, her tone darkening, came from a man named Ohu. He was given to Mbada, the founding father of our village, by his father when he set out to build his own settlement. Ohu worked for Mbada for many years, and over time, Mbada grew fond of him, treating him not just as a servant but as a brother. So fond, in fact, that Mbada decided to set him free and grant him land and a name. Instead of bearing Ohu, which is the title of his station as a slave, a great honor indeed, he even planned a ceremony to cleanse Ohu's status, to remove the stain of slavery from his lineage forever. Adana listened intently, already sensing the tragedy about to unfold. But the night before the cleansing ritual, Nkechi continued, her voice hardening. A scream was heard in the compound. It was the voice of Ogonna, Mbada's third wife. When the people rushed to her hut, they found her weeping, and there, standing nearby with his wrapper barely clinging to his waist, was Ohu. Adana's eyes widened. She could already see where this was going. When they asked Ogonna what had happened, Nkechi went on. She said that Ohu had entered her hut in the darkness, uninvited. At first, she thought it was Mbada, but when she reached out to touch him, she realized it was not her husband. She grabbed his wrapper, and in the struggle, Ohu ran out, dragging her along. Adana could barely breathe. The story was filled with horror and betrayal, but also with questions. Why would Ohu do that to himself just a night before his freedom? Could it be true, or was there more to the story than what had been passed down? When Mbada asked Ohu if what Ogonna said was true, Ohu remained silent. He could not defend himself. His silence was his undoing. Mbada, who had come to trust him as a brother, was filled with rage. Instead of the ritual of freedom, Ohu was executed the next morning, and his body was left for the wild animals in the great forest. Adana's heart raced as she imagined the brutality of that moment, the injustice that seemed to hang in the air, and the silence that must have screamed louder than words. Ohu's entire lineage had been cursed, condemned to forever bear the stain of slavery and disgrace. Even the cleansing ritual, later performed by one of Ohu's descendants after much wealth was gained, could not wipe away the past. It was our matriarch, Nkechi added, her voice filled with bitterness, the woman who gave Mbada his first son, Okafo, that was wronged. This is why I don't want you associating with the Okolis. That bloodline carries a curse, and I will not have my grandchildren tainted by it. Adana sat, frozen in place, her mind spinning from the weight of the story. She knew the superstition that ran deep in the village, the old stories that clung to every family like shadows. But this one felt so different. This wasn't just about old grudges or rumors. This was a deep ancestral wound, one that had festered through generations. But even in her shock, Adana felt a deep stirring of resistance. She cleared her throat, speaking gently but firmly. Mama, she began, choosing her words carefully. The present generation has nothing to do with what their ancestor did. If Shieligwe, the Almighty God, has forgiven them and blessed them as seen in their prosperity and great number of children, male and female, Who are we to hold their past against them? Before she could say more, Nkechi stood up abruptly, the force of her movement startling Adana. Her mother in law's face had darkened with an emotion that sent chills down Adana's spine. Fear gripped her heart as she watched the elder woman's frame soar over her. In her panic, Adana stumbled backward, falling onto the hard surface of the sleeping mold. But before she could gather her thoughts, a sharp piercing pain shot through her belly. She gasped, the force of the pain nearly knocking the breath from her lungs. Then it came again, stronger this time. Her voice caught in her throat as she cried out, clutching her belly. Something was wrong. The pain intensified with each passing second, and all she could do was scream as it overwhelmed her, drowning out everything else. Adana! She heard Nkechi shout in alarm, but her voice seemed distant, muffled by the waves of pain. Adana's words spiraled into chaos, her body racked with agony. Her piercing screams echoed through the compound, alerting everyone. Within moments, the entire family rushed toward Nkechi's hut, their faces tight with panic. Her father-in-law, Okafor, must have returned while she was still in conversation with Nkechi, quickly took charge of the chaotic scene. His booming voice cut through the air, snapping people out of their shock. Mbechi, Okafor called, directing his eldest son's wife. Run and fetch the midwife. Hurry! His gaze turned toward his sons. Carry Adana to her hut immediately, now! The men acted quickly, lifting Adana's limp body as gently as they could and carried her back to her hut. Okafor continued to give commands, his calm yet forceful demeanor managing the panic that had taken over the compound. Inside the hut, the elderly midwife worked tirelessly, but as the night wore on, Adana grew weaker. Her strength was fading fast, and her body was failing her. The labor dragged into the early hours of the morning, and by dawn, a heavy silence filled the hut. The midwife, her hands trembling with exhaustion, admitted she didn't know what else to do. We must consult the chief priest, someone whispered. It seemed like the only solution left, to plead for divine intervention. Just as they were preparing to send for him, a soft voice broke through the tense silence. I can help her! The voice was quiet, but in the stillness, everyone heard it clearly. Heads turned towards the source, and there, standing at the entrance of the compound, was a young maiden. She had a calabash of herbs in her hands, her presence calm yet commanding in a strange way. For a moment, no one moved. Kenichi, Adana's husband, stared at the maiden, his eyes widening as if suddenly recognizing her. Without hesitation, he rushed towards her, almost pushing her into the hut before anyone else could react. The maiden, who later introduced herself as Ayanwu, entered the hut with purpose. Moments later, she emerged, her calm voice breaking through the chaos. I need a pot of hot water, a clean white wrapper that has never been worn, and the eldest man and the woman in the village to stand at the entrance with the family totem. She instructed, the child must be welcomed into the family with a promise that he will be loved and protected as a full-blooded Mwambada. For a moment, everyone stared at her, unsure of what to do. The request was strange. Why would they need to welcome their own child? No one bore a grudge against the unborn child. But when Adana's agonized scream tore through the air again, they scrambled into action, following Anyanwu's instructions. The preparations were swift. Okafor and the eldest woman, Nkechi, took their places at the entrance, holding the sacred totem. Hot water was boiled, and the clean white wrapper was placed into Anyanwu's waiting hands. Inside, the air thickened with tension, but there was also hope. After hours of difficulty, the labor began to shift. And then, at midday, with the sun high above, a loud, clear cry pierced the air. Relief flooded the family as Anyanwu emerged from the hut, cradling the newborn in her arms, wrapped in the clean white clothes. She handed the baby first to Okafor, who gazed at his grandson with pride. He raised the child, offering him to Chieligwe the Almighty in a prayer of gratitude. Reluctantly, Okafor passed the baby into Kelechi's waiting arms. As the father looked down at his son, a strange expression crossed his face. It was as if he had seen something impossible, something that only he could understand. But just as quickly as the moment came, it passed, and he smiled down at the child. Okafor, always sharp eyed, noticed the odd reaction but said nothing, choosing to save his questions for later. After Kelechi had offered his own prayer to Chieligwe, the child was passed among the family. She hesitated at first, but as the baby was placed into her arms, something inside her changed. The love she had never thought she could feel for her son's child filled her heart, overwhelming her. In that moment, as she gazed down at the innocent face, all the bitterness and resentment she had harbored towards Kenichi seemed to evaporate. The guilt of how she had treated him and Adana suddenly weighed heavily on her, and she wondered if it was too late to seek forgiveness. But there, holding her grandson, Nkechi's heart softened. Perhaps, she thought, there was still time to heal the wounds of the past. Her thoughts were interrupted by the soft murmur of the family outside, exchanging words of joy and relief. As the family rejoiced, Nkechi looked down at the grandson, her heart full of love and uncertainty for what lay ahead. As the family celebrated their newest addition, no one noticed the quiet figure that slipped away from their midst. When they remembered to thank her, Anyanwu was nowhere to be found. She had left as quietly as she had come, disappearing into the early morning light once she was sure that Adana and the baby were all right. No one knew where she came from or where she had gone, but her presence lingered in their hearts like a distant memory. After consultations with his chi, the child was given the name Omiri, meaning he who does great things. It was a name unfamiliar to their lineage, yet it was clear that their chi had spoken, and their faith in the divine voice was unshakable. Omire became the name that foretold greatness, a name that seemed to carry the weight of future achievements. As Omire grew, it became clear that he was no ordinary child. A brightness seemed to surround him, a light that seemed to draw people to him effortlessly. His charm and grace captured the hearts of everyone in the village. From the moment he was born, Adana found herself constantly begging just to hold her own child. It seemed that no one could bear to part with him, and even when he was asleep, the villagers refused to put him down, marveling at his beauty and peaceful presence. At first, Adana appreciated the attention, using it as an opportunity to rest and recover from the difficult labor. But as time passed, the constant demand for her son became overwhelming. Even husband had to intervene, eventually forbidding visitors after sundown, so that the baby could rest. He worried that Omire hardly had a moment of peace to himself. The arrival of Omire seemed to heal old wounds in the family. Okafor, his grandfather and head of the 12 families, decreed that anyone caught mistreating Kelechi or Adana would be severely punished. Nkechi, his grandmother, became so attached to the boy that she couldn't bear to stay away from him for even a day. She made several attempts to persuade Kelechi to move back to the main compound, but each time he refused. He even forbade Adana from raising the topic again after she tried several times to convince him. Kelechi knew that his mother was behind his wife's efforts, but no matter what anyone said, he couldn't forget his grandmother's warning on her deathbed. Her last words to him echoed in his mind, along with the signs she had foretold, some of which had already begun to manifest. He had to be cautious, for the calamity his grandmother spoke of could not be ignored. He stood his ground, not revealing the true reasons for his stubbornness. As Omire approached his 10th year birthday, Okavo decided to have a private conversation with Kenichi. After blessing of the kola, Kenichi sat quietly before his father in the dimly lit obi, the traditional family hut reserved for important ceremony and reception of visitors by the head of the family. The air was thick with unspoken words, As Okafor gathered his thoughts, they drank palm wine in silence, and the rhythmic crunch of kola nuts filled the space between them. Finally, after a long pause, Okafor cleared his throat, his voice deep and thoughtful. My son, he began, his eyes fixed with a faraway look. There are things that have weighed heavily on my heart for some time now. The time has come for us to speak about it. Kelechi nodded respectfully, his gaze steady but his mind racing. The uncertainty of what his father had to say made him uneasy. Okafor continued, your son Omire is special. You see how the people are drawn to him, how even your mother has softened because of him. He carries something within him, a greatness, yes, but also a responsibility. Kenechi's eyes darkened slightly as his father's words touched the edge of what he had been trying to avoid. He remained silent, waiting for his father to continue. Your grandmother's warning, Okafor said, his voice lowering as if speaking the words themselves could summon danger, was not without reason. I've watched closely over these years and I see the signs she spoke. But I also see that you have been carrying this burden alone. It's time, my son, that you share what you know with me. Tell me, why have you kept the distance from the main compound all these years? And what did your grandmother say to you before she passed? Kenechi's heart pounded in his chest. He had kept the secret buried for so long that speaking it out loud felt like opening an old wound. But he could see the concern in his father's eyes, the quiet plea for understanding. He realized that this moment was not just about him anymore. It was about the future of their family, about protecting Omire. After a long silence, Kelechi finally spoke. Father, he began, his voice steady but laced with tension. The day my grandmother passed, she called me to her side and spoke of things I never could have imagined. She warned me about the inheritance, the land she gave to me, and about the consequences that would come if I allowed myself or my family to return to the main compound. Okafor's brow furrowed in confusion, but he did not interrupt. He could sense the weight of the secret about to be revealed. She told me, Kenichi continued, that the land carries a curse that was placed upon it long ago, before our people settled here. She said the land is meant for me, but only if I keep my distance from the rest of the family. If we return, if we step too close to the main compound, the curse will awaken and it will bring calamity to us all. The room fell into a heavy silence. Okafor sat back, processing his son's words, his expression unreadable. Kenichi waited, bracing himself for his father's reaction. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, Okafor spoke again, his voice soft but firm. And you believe this curse is real? Kenichi nodded. I do. I've seen the signs, father, the strange occurrences, the way things have shifted around us. I cannot ignore it. Okafor sighed deeply, rubbing a hand over his withered face. This is a heavy burden, my son, one that you shouldn't carry alone. But now that I know, we must find a way forward. Omire will soon be initiated into youth, and with that comes new responsibilities. We must protect him, but we must also prepare him for the future. Kenichi nodded, grateful for his father's understanding. Yes, father, we will protect him. Together, father and son sat in the quiet of the Obi, the weight of their conversation settling around them like a mantle. The future remained uncertain, but the first time, Kenichi felt that he was no longer alone in carrying the heavy burden his grandmother had left him. Kenichi shifted in his chair now that he had spoken of the curse. There was no turning back. He had kept the details to himself for too long, but his father had a right to know the full truth, especially now that Omire was approaching the age of initiation. Father, Kenichi continued hesitantly, the curse is older than any of us. It is connected to our family's history with the Okoli lineage. You know the story that has been told about their ancestor, Ohu, the slave who was granted freedom by our forefather Mbada. but dishonored his trust? Okafor nodded gravely, his eyes narrowing. Yes, I remember. It's a tale passed down from generation to generation. Ohu's betrayal and the curse that followed. Kelechi took a deep breath before continuing. What our people don't know is that the curse did not end with the Ohu's execution. His bloodline, the Okoli family, was cursed to live as outcasts, but it was more than just a social stain. The curse was sealed in the very land itself, the land that grandmother gave to me. Okafor's eyes widened, but he remained silent, letting his son speak. Before she passed, grandmother told me that our family's connection to the Okoli lineage runs deeper than just the betrayal. After Ohu's execution, Mbada feared that the curse would bring ruin to his descendants. He consulted with the chief priest, who told him that as long as the land remained separated from the main family, the curse would remain dormant. But if anyone from our bloodline allowed themselves or their family to rejoin the main compound, the curse would awaken, bringing calamity not just to us, but to the entire village. Okafor's expression darkened, his brow furrowing as he tried to grasp the full weight of what Kenichi was saying. What kind of calamity? Kenichi swallowed hard, his voice trembling slightly. Death, famine, madness. It will start with the family, those closest to the land, but it will spread. Father, the curse was never just about punishing the Okoli family. It was about balance. Mbada violated the natural order by attempting to make a slave a freeborn, and that imbalance has been waiting, lurking beneath the surface. The silence in the Obi was suffocating as Okafor processed the gravity of his son's revelation. He sat back, his hands resting heavily on his knees. Deep in thought, the connection between the Okoli family and the curse suddenly seemed far more personal. Omire, Okafor finally murmured, his voice barely audible. Is he? Kenichi's jaw tightened as he glanced at the entrance to the hut, as though sensing the vulnerability of his son outside. Grandmother warned me that Omire would be the key. He carries the light, yes, but that light will attract darkness. If we aren't careful, Father, he could be the one to trigger the curse's awakening. That's why I cannot allow us to return to the main compound. Okafor's heart sank. That's why you've kept the distance all these years. Not out of pride, but out of fear. Kenichi nodded slowly. I've seen the signs, the strange dreams, the whispers in the village. Even my mother's softened heart towards my wife and I. There is something unnatural about it. As much as I love my son, I can feel that there is more to him than meets the eye. Okafor leaned forward, placing a steady hand on his son's shoulder. And you've carried this alone. All these years? Why did you not tell me sooner? Kelechi's voice faltered. Because I didn't want to burden you with this knowledge. I thought that by keeping our distance, by staying away from the main compound, I could keep the cause at bay. But now, with Omire turning 10 and approaching the initiation into youth, I fear we may be running out of time. The two men sat in heavy silence, the weight of the ancient curse looming over them like a storm on the horizon. For years, Kenichi had kept his family isolated, believing that as long as they stayed away from the ancestral land, they would be safe. But now, the signs were becoming too closer to ignore. Okafor's voice was steady as he finally spoke again. We must be careful with Omire. His destiny is intertwined with the curse. But perhaps there is a way to protect him. Protect all of us from what is to come. Kenichi nodded, his mind racing with the enormity of their task. I believe there is a way, Father, but it will not be easy. The curse was placed on the land, and the only way to lift it is through a ritual, one that has to be done and performed in generations. Okafor's eyes hardened with determination. Then we'll find a way. We cannot let this curse destroy our family or our village. I will speak with the elders and consult the chief priest. We must act quickly before Omire's initiation. If the curse is real, it must be stopped before it awakens. Kenichi felt a flicker of hope. For the first time in years, with his father's help, perhaps they could protect Omire from the curse and break the cycle that had plagued their family for generations. As the father and son rose from their seats, the weight of the ancient curse hung in the air. But for the first time, they were not alone in facing it. Years passed, and Omire grew into a fine young boy, admired by all for his sharp mind, gentle demeanor, and the brightness that seemed to follow him wherever he went. He is fast approaching manliness, and after his initiation in youth, he will be settled with a portion of his own farmland and a land to build his own hut and obi in preparation for his own family. Many families were already trying to win Adana and Kenechi's heart, so they will consider their daughters for Omiri. But Kenechi had long decided that his children will choose their own life partners, like his father did for him. Unless any of them came for his help, he will not interfere but only guide with his wisdom and experience as an elder. Omire's initiation into youth was fast approaching, a ceremony that marked the transition from boyhood to a young man capable of learning the responsibilities of adulthood. The village was bustling with excitement as Omire's presence seemed to inspire hope. Yet, beneath the joy and pride surrounding Omire's impending initiation, there was a deeper tension simmering in the village. The people of Omumbada had long suffered from inexplicable misfortunes. The difficulty in bearing sons had become a recurring tragedy for many families, leaving several lineages with dwindling heirs. What was once a prosperous village, full of life and abundance, now struggled with diminishing fertility. The fruitfulness of their farms, too, had begun to wane. Crops that had once thrived in their rich soil now withered under the sun, their yields growing smaller with each passing season. The elders whispered of old curses, and many believed that the village's suffering was tied to the land and to the bloodline that ruled over them. For the Okafor family, descendants of Mbada's first son, had long been the head of the kingdom of Umumbada. Their leadership had endured for generations, with the village looking to them for guidance and protection. But in recent years, the curse seemed to weigh more heavily on them than ever before. Kenichi and Okafor had been vigilant since their conversation in the Obi. They had quietly consulted with the chief priest and the elders, seeking ways to break the ancient curse that had plagued their family. But the answers they sought were elusive, and they knew that time was running short. Omire's initiation could trigger the very calamity they had feared. The night after the initiation ceremony, Omire sat alone in his hut, the echoes of the ritual still fresh in his mind. It had been a beautiful week, filled with singing and dancing after the initial solemn ceremony by the elders and priests. But something had happened afterward, something that had unsettled him. As he lay down to rest one night after the ceremony had ended, a figure had appeared to him, a maiden, radiant and mystical, standing at the threshold of his hut. Her face was familiar, though he couldn't place where he had seen her before. She had spoken to him in a voice that was both soft and commanding, telling him things that left his heart heavy with questions. The next morning, Omire felt compelled to seek out his father and grandfather. He knew the weight of his family's legacy, even if the full truth had never been revealed to him. But now, he had learned something that could not be ignored. He found Kenichi and Okafor seated together in the Obi, discussing like they have done many times before. Omire, respectful as always, bowed slightly before speaking. Father, grandfather, there is something I must tell you. Both men looked at him with curiosity, sensing the seriousness in his voice. Kenichi gestured for him to sit. What is it, my son? Okafor, leaning forward slightly, asked. Omire hesitated, choosing his words carefully. Last night, after the initiation, Emily came to me. She spoke to me and told me things I do not understand. Kenichi's heart skipped a beat, and his face paled. A maiden? He asked, his voice tight. What did she look like? Omire looked at his father, unsure of why the question carried much weight. She was young, with dark hair decorated with the sacred white beads, and she carried a calabash of herbs. Her eyes were kind, but there was something powerful about her. She reminded me of someone, but I don't know who. Kenichi and Okafor exchanged shocking glances. The description matched Anyanwu perfectly, the mysterious maiden who had helped deliver Omire years ago, but had disappeared afterward. No one had ever spoken of her to Omire, nor had anyone known where she had come from or where she had gone. She was a mystery, her origins unknown, and she had not been seen since the night of Omire's birth. And what did she say to you? Okafor asked, his voice steady, but his eyes filled with concern. She told me. Omire hesitated, his brow furrowed as he recalled the words. She told me that the story I had heard about the Okoli family was false. That Ohu, the man who was executed, was innocent of the crime for which he was killed. He was not the one who wronged Mbada's wife. He was framed, and his death brought a curse upon our family, not theirs as we have long believed. The words hung in the air like a heavy mist. Kenichi felt as though the ground had shifted beneath him. His grandmother's deathbed warning suddenly took on a new meaning. They had all lived with the belief that the curse was placed on the Okoli family, that Ohu's betrayal had led to their disgrace. But now, the truth was unraveling in a way he had never imagined. Omire continued. The maiden said that Mbada's wife, Ogonna, was not attacked by Ohu, but by Mbada's younger brother, who had set out with him. Ohu remained silent because he was a man of slow speech, and the tension of the moment worsened his speech. And he was also afraid that no one would believe him. And he was right. The chief priest of the time was bribed by the culprit to conceal the truth. Ohu was killed, and in doing so, Mbada cursed his own bloodline. Kenichi's mind raced. If this were true, everything they had believed was a lie. The hatred toward the Okoli family, the division, the curse that had haunted their lineage, it had all been based on a falsehood. And now, that falsehood had become the curse that threatened their family's future. Okafor sat back, his face ashamed. This cannot be, he murmured. For generations, we have blamed the Okoli family. We have treated them as lesser, believing they were cursed. But if this is true, Kenichi's voice was hoarse as he spoke. It means that the curse is on us not because of the land, like we previously believed. The land was cursed because it received the blood of an innocent. Our family had been cursed for the sin of killing an innocent man, and now the curse is working. Omile looked at his father and grandfather, the weight of the revelation clear in his eyes. The maiden Anyanwu also told me that the curse can be broken if the truth is revealed, only if we undo the lies that have been told. Kenichi stood, pacing the large hut, his mind turning with the implications. How could they possibly reveal the truth after all these years? How could they undo the damage that had been done to both families? Anyanwu told me one more thing, Omire added, his voice soft but firm. She said that the curse will come for me if we do not act soon. I am the key. Father, I was born under this curse, and I will bear the weight of it if we do nothing. Silence fell over the room as the full weight of the revelation settled on them. The mystery of the maiden, Anyanwu, who had appeared at Omire's birth and again after his initiation, now seemed all the more profound. No one had seen her since that day, and no one knew where she had come from. It was as though she had appeared from another world, guiding them towards the truth that had been buried for so long. Kenichi and Okafor stood in the midst of a secret that had the power to destroy everything or to save it. We must make things right, Kenichi finally said, his voice resolute. We must find a way to reveal the truth about Ohu and clear the Okoli family's name. If we do not, the curse will consume us all. Okafor nodded slowly, the weight of generation resting on his shoulders. It will not be easy. The elders will resist. The village has lived with this lie for too long. But we must try, Omire said quietly, for the sake of our family, for the sake of the truth. The weight of the revelation pressed heavily on them as they sat in silence, contemplating the grave truth about the curse, the false accusations that had condemned Ohu. The Okoli ancestor had unleashed generations of suffering, and now the time had come to set things right. But even as they grappled with the enormity of the situation, there was one more piece to the puzzle that Anyanwu, the mysterious maiden, had shared with Omire during her visit the night after his initiation. Omire, who had been quietly listening to his father and grandfather, suddenly spoke, his voice calm yet resolute. There is something else the maiden told me. Kenichi and Okafor turned to him, their expression filled with both curiosity and dread. What is it, my son? Okafor asked, already sensing that this final revelation would not be easy to bear. Omire straightened his back and continued. Anyanwu said that for the curse to be fully broken and for peace to restore to our family and to the entire land, I must marry a daughter of the Okoli family. Only by uniting the two bloodlines can the damage be repaired and the balance restored. Keneshi's eyes widened in shock. Marry a daughter of the Okoli family? He echoed, as though the very idea was inconceivable. For generations, Umumbada and the Okoli families had lived in hostility, separated by the lies that had been woven into their histories. A marriage between the two families was unthinkable. The village would surely reject such an idea. Okafor's face darkened as he considered the implications. The Okoli family had been treated as outcasts for as long as anyone can remember. To suggest that one of our own, especially you, Omire, should marry one of their daughters, he trailed off, shaking his head. But Omire's face was calm and unwavering. It's the only way, grandfather. Anyanwu said that if we do not unite the bloodlines, the curse will never be lifted. The famine that has been on the increase for generations now, the decrease in the birthing of sons, and the general misfortune all over the land, that they all originated from the injustice done to Oho. Our father's actions activated this curse, and only by correcting that wrong can we bring an end to the suffering. Kenichi, still reeling from the revelation, began to pace again. But how can we make the village accept such a marriage? The Okoli family has been treated as outsiders for generations. Our people have been told that their bloodline is cursed. And now you are asking to marry one of their daughters? Omire met his father's gaze, his eyes filled with determination. Father, the village has lived in ignorance for far too long. The curse is not on the Okoli family. It has been on us this whole time. The Okoli family will be the ones doing us a favor if they agree to the union. If we do not tell the truth, if we do not find the courage to stand up and make things right, then the curse will destroy us. You saw what happened after I was born. The village was drawn to me, and they sensed something special. But that light can also attract darkness. The mysterious maiden warned me that if we do not act soon, the curse will come for me and it will spread. Okafor, though shaken, understood the gravity of the situation. He had lived long enough to know that sometimes the hardest decisions were the ones that brought true change. He sighed heavily and spoke, his voice heavy with the wisdom of his years. My sons, he said, addressing both Kenichi and Omire, this will not be an easy path. The village may resist, and the elders will question everything we say. But if Ayamu spoke the truth, and if marrying into the Okoli family is the only way to break the curse, then we must find a way to make it happen. For the sake of our family, for the sake of our future generations, and for the sake of peace. Kenechi's face softened as he considered his father's words. He looked at Omire, seeing in him the future of their lineage, and realized that his son had already accepted the burden of his destiny. Omire was willing to sacrifice his own future to restore balance and heal the wounds of the past. There must be a daughter in the Okoli family, Omire continued, a maiden who is capable of understanding the weight of this union, who can help us restore what was broken. If we find her, then perhaps we can convince the elders and the village to accept this marriage as the path to redemption. Kenichi nodded slowly, though doubt still flickered in his mind. And what if the Okoli family refuses? After everything that has happened, after all the pain they have endured because of us, will they even agree to such a marriage? Omire's eyes were filled with quiet certainty. We must give them the truth. We must tell them what really happened to Ohu and clear their family's name. Only then can we ask them to join our bloodlines. If they say that we are sincere, that we are trying to right the wrongs of the past, then perhaps they will agree. And we must ask mother for help, for she has a strong bond with Amara, one of the wives in Okoli family. Okafor looked at his grandson, seeing the strength and resolve that seemed far beyond his years. You are wise, Omiri, wiser than many of us. If this is what Anyanwu has foretold, then we will follow her guidance. Kenichi stood still for a long moment before finally speaking again. We will go to the Okoli family. We will tell them the truth, and we will ask for their forgiveness. If they agree, then we will propose the marriage. But this will not be easy. The village may rise against us. Okafor placed a hand on his son's shoulder. If we stand united, they cannot break us. The truth is on our side, and the ancestors will guide us. Omire smiled faintly, the weight of his destiny resting heavily on his young shoulders. I will do whatever it takes to bring peace to our family. The tension in the room was palpable as the three men made a silent vow to face whatever came next. The road ahead would be long and difficult, but they knew that the curse had to be broken and the truth had to be revealed. Only then could the Mbada and Okoli families find peace. The weight of their decision pressed heavily on them. The revelation that the entire village suffering, the dwindling fertility, the withering crops was tied to a curse they all believed to be on the Okoli family, when in truth it was their own burden, was more than any of them could have imagined. And now, the idea of marrying a daughter of the Okoli family to break that curse seemed like a distant, impossible dream. Yet they knew they had no choice. The village of Umumbada had suffered long enough. We must act quickly, Okafor said as they gathered again in the Obi. His face, once hardened by years of leadership, now seemed weighed down by the gravity of the situation. The village is already under tension. They whisper of curses and old sins, though they do not know the truth. If we wait much longer, the curse will grow stronger and it will consume us all. Kenichi nodded, his jaw clenched. Father, you are right, but convincing the village will be difficult. For generations, they have been told the Okoli family is cursed. They will resist. And what if the Okoli family refuses, after everything we've done to them? Okafor sighed, his withered hands resting on his knees. It's true that the village will not easily accept this truth, but we must try. And as for the Okoli family, we must approach them with humility and honesty. If they see that we are sincere in our desire to make amends, they may be willing to accept this union. But it will not be easy. Kenechi, your wife Adana had also unknowingly paved the way for us by befriending Amara and ensuring she was not cast aside by the women in the village. So I believe that will go a long way in giving us favor before them. Omire, who had been listening quietly, now spoke, His voice, though young, carried the weight of his destiny. I will go to them. Kenichi turned to his son, a mix of pride and concern in his eyes. Omire, this will not be as easy as you think. This will not be an easy task. You are still young, and this burden is not yours alone to carry. But it is my burden, father. Omire replied firmly. I was born under this curse. Anyanwu said that I am the key to breaking it. I must be the one to face them and make things right. The Okoli family deserves to hear the truth from me. Only then can we ask for their forgiveness and for the chance to reunite our family. Anakugo, Amara's last daughter, is tender towards me. I won't mind if she becomes my wife. She is a beautiful maiden with a kind spirit like her mother. I believe I and my mother can water the ground before you and our elders can approach them officially. Okafor nodded slowly, admiring his grandson's courage. He's right, Kenichi. The boy has been chosen for this task, and it is time to step forward. But he will not go alone. We will go with him to the Okoli family. Together, we will present the truth before we involve the rest of the clans and their family elders. The plan was set. They would visit the Okoli family, confess the sins of their ancestors, and seek forgiveness. Only then would they propose the union between Omire and one of the Okoli daughters. But as the sun set that evening, casting long shadows over the village of Umumbada, the three men knew that the journey ahead was fraught with uncertainty. The next morning, the air was thick with tension as Kelechi, Okafor, and Omire made their way to the Okolie homestead. Though they had lived as neighbors for generations, the distance between their families had grown wide with distrust and suspicion. As they approached the compound, Omire could feel his heart pounding in his chest. The large Okoli family compound was filled with beautiful huts and abundant fruit trees. The huts were all well maintained. One could easily tell that there was wealth here with the scent of fresh herbs and delicious scent filling the air. The family had always been known for their skills in healing and herbal medicines, a legacy passed down from their ancestor Ohu, despite the stain of the past. As they entered the compound, they were met by Obiora, the eldest man of the Okoli family. He regarded them with a mix of curiosity and caution. What brings the head of Umumbada clan to our humble home? Okafor stepped forward, his gesture respectful yet firm. We have come to speak with you and your elders. There are truths that must be revealed, and there are amends we must seek. Obiero's brow furrowed, but he nodded and led them into the family gathering area, where the other elder of the Okoli family soon joined. Adora, the matriarch of the Okoli family, sat at the corner, her eyes sharp and filled with the wisdom of many years. He gestured for them to sit. What is it that you wish to say? He asked, his voice steady but with an undercurrent of suspicion. Too many waters have been muddled over the years, and he couldn't think of why after how many generations did the direct heirs of Mbada stepped foot in their land. If not that Amara had pleaded, and that they have seen the kindness of Adana and Omire towards them, this meeting might not have taken place. But he will be patient to hear them out first, and if what they bring is not favorable towards, he will dismiss them just like they have done to him and his entire clan for generations. Okafor cleared his throat and began. For generations, our family has lived apart, divided by lies and misunderstandings. We have treated you unjustly, blamed you for a curse that had plagued our village. But today, we come to tell the truth. The Okoli family listened in silence as Okafor and Kenichi told the story of Ohu's wrongful execution, the lies that had been spread about his betrayal, and how Mbada's bloodline had been cursed for killing an innocent man. They spoke about the suffering the village had endured, the dwindling births of sons, the barren land, and how all of it was connected to the injustice done to the Okoli family. When they finished, a heavy silence settled over the compound. Obiora's face was unreadable, but his eyes gleamed with the intensity of someone who had carried the burden of a broken legacy for far too long. "And now you come to seek for forgiveness?" he asked, his voice low. "We do," Kelechi said, his voice filled with sincerity. "But we do not only seek your forgiveness. The mysterious maiden who had visited our family twice told us that the only way to break this curse is to unite our families in marriage. She has chosen my son Omire to marry a daughter of the Okoli family. It is the only way to restore peace to our people and heal the land." The Okoli family exchanged glances. Obiora's face was tense, but it was Adora who spoke this time. "This is a heavy request. After all these years, after all the pain we have endured, you asked to join our bloodlines with the very family that cursed us." Omire stepped forward, his voice calm but strong. "If I may please speak amongst my elders, I know this matter is way above my head, but I would like to take advantage of the privilege given to me through the revelation to speak." He paused here, looking respectfully at Obiora. Obiora looked at the handsome young man, whom he had always admired from afar, remembering how the boy, like his mother, had never avoided him or any member of his family like the rest of the village does. He had even helped him to carry his load one time from the farm without minding what the people were saying. He was indeed a strange child, and more than what anyone else had to say, he wanted to know what Omire wanted to say. So he nodded, giving the young man the go-ahead to speak. "Thank you," Omire said gratefully as he continued. "I ask not myself, but to our people. We cannot change the past, but we can choose to heal the future. Anyanwu told me that this union is the only way to bring peace. One of your daughters has caught my eyes for a long time, which is why I have not courted any maiden from this village, because I was afraid of the backlash, and that is why I held back all this while. And I ask you to grant me the permission. I would love to court and marry Akugo beyond the lifting of the curses, but I will do whatever it takes to restore the peace that our fathers destroyed by their wickedness and ignorance. Mbada, our father, taught good for Ohu, your father, but some wicked men turned that good intention to a curse. Please give us another chance to right these wrongs and bring to the fulfillment the original intention of Mbada to reality. Thank you, my elders," he concluded and sat down. Silence reigned as words hung heavily in the air. Adora studied him for a long moment, her eyes narrowing slightly as she weighed his words. Obiora, finally, speaking in a low measured tone, said, "We will ponder on what you have said and get back to you." Others nodded, as well agreeing with what the patriarch had said. Okafor and his sons thanked them and bid them goodbyes, hoping that Omire's wise words has a good impact. When they were finally alone, the Okoli family sat in silence for a while until Adora cleared her throat and said, "There is truth in what they say. Remember the vision that was told the night that Akugo was born by this same maiden they spoke of. She introduced herself as our matriarch, the wife of Ohu. Remember, she said, Akugo will brighten our paths, and when the offended returns, we must not cast him away again. What if she means Omire is Ohu, reincarnated, and Akugo is the reincarnation of Anyanwu, his wife? Let us be careful not to destroy ourselves as a result of resentment and anger. If the maiden has spoken, then we must consider what has been asked." Obiora nodded, remembering, "You are right. If Ohu indeed has returned as Omire, he must welcome him back with an open arms and not cast him away like they did before." With this decision, The Okoli family settled the age-long grudge that had been held in their hearts, and a meeting was arranged once again with Okafor and his sons. This time, the air was light and peaceful. After the breaking of kola, Obiora cleared his throat and said, "Very well, we will agree to the union, but know this, it will not erase the pain of the past. It will take time for trust to be rebuilt." Kenichi bowed his head in gratitude. "We understand. We do not expect forgiveness to come easily, but we are willing to do the work needed to heal." Omire felt a sense of relief wash over him, though he knew the road ahead would not be simple. The Okoli family had agreed, but the villagers, the elders, they would be the next challenge. For now, however, the first step had been taken, the truth had been revealed, and the path to breaking the curse had begun. As the days passed, the decision to unite the Mbada and Okoli families spread like wildfire through the village. What had been a carefully guarded secret was now being discussed in every corner of the village. The elders, the youth, the farmers, and the traders, everyone had an opinion. Many were shocked, some were angry, and others were quietly relieved that the truth had finally come to light. Kenechi, Okafor, and Omire knew that convincing the village to accept the marriage would be difficult. For generations, they had lived under the belief that the Okoli family was cursed, and undoing that belief would take more than words. Still, they moved forward, determined to see the curse broken and peace restored to the land. The next step came when Okafor called for a gathering of the village elders. These men and women, who held the highest authority in the families, would ultimately decide the fate of the union. The meeting took place in the Obi of Umbada, located in the Okafor compound, where the most important decisions of the village had always been made. When the elders had gathered, the room buzzed with mixture of tension and curiosity. The faces of elders were a mix of skepticism and anticipation, knowing that the issue at hand would have lasting consequences for the entire village. Okafor, as the head of the 12 families, stood before them and spoke clearly, his voice carrying the weight of his position. "We have called you here today because it is time for the truth to be revealed. For generations, we have believed that the Okoli family was cursed and they were responsible for our village suffering. But I tell you now, that story was a lie." The room fell silent as Okafor told the story of Ohu, the innocent man who had been falsely accused and executed. He explained how the curse had been placed on the Mbada family, not the Okoli family, and how the suffering of the village, the dwindling births of sons, and the barren fields was a direct result of their ancestors' actions. "The curse had affected all of us," Okafor continued. "It had poisoned our land, our crops, and our people. But there is a way to break it. The maiden who helped bring my grandson Omire into this world has spoken to us. She revealed that the only way to break this curse is for our families to unite. My grandson Omire must marry a daughter of the Okoli family. This union is the only path to healing and restoring balance to our village." The elders listened in stunned silence. For many, this was difficult to accept. The Okoli family had long been regarded as outcasts, blamed for misfortunes that were now revealed to be caused by the Mbada's family-owned actions. The idea of uniting the two families seemed to some an insult to tradition. One of the elder, Nnamdi, stood and spoke with a frown. "Nnani Okafor, what you say is troubling. How can we simply erase the past and join with the Okoli family? Our ancestors would never have allowed such a thing." Another elder, Mama Ezinne, who had always been known for her wisdom and fairness, nodded thoughtfully. "Nnamdi speaks truth, but we must also consider what is best for the future of our people. The signs are clear. Our land is suffering. Our families are shrinking. If this union can heal our village, then perhaps it is time we let go of old grudges." The debate raged for hours. Some elders resisted the idea, clinging to the beliefs that had held for so long. Others, seeing the decline of the villagers' prosperity, were more open to change. But as the discussion wore on, it became clear that the only way forward was through the truth. Finally, Okafor spoke again, his voice steady. The past cannot be changed, but the future is still ours to shape. If we do not act now, the curse will continue to destroy us. My grandson had agreed to this union, and the Okoli family has agreed as well. The choice is now yours. Will you stand in the way of the village's salvation, or will you allow this union to heal the land? The room fell silent again, but this time the silence was contemplative. Slowly, one by one, the elders nodded their heads in agreement. The truth had been revealed, and they could not deny the signs any longer. Nnamdi sighed, his face softening. Very well, Okafor, we will support the union. Let this marriage be the beginning of healing for Omumbada. With the elders' approval, the way was clear for the marriage to move forward. The news spread quickly through the village, and while some who had desired for Omire to be theirs resisted the idea, most of the villagers began to accept that the union was necessary for their survival. The day of the marriage arrived, and the village of Omumbada gathered in the central square for the ceremony. It was a day unlike any other, a day that marked the beginning of a new chapter for the village. The air was filled with a sense of anticipation, and the tension that had once gripped the village seemed to lift. Omire, dressed in the traditional ceremonial garb, stood at the front of the gathering, his heart steady but full of emotion. He had grown into a young man with a wisdom and grace far beyond his years, and he knew that his marriage to Akugo was not just about love or tradition. It was about healing the wounds of the past and ensuring a future for his people. Akugo stepped forward, her face calm but beneath the surface. She was radiating with joy. It always felt to her like Omire was meant to be hers, but the enmity between the two families had made her dreams and desire so far-fetched. But now standing here as his bride-to-be, she could hardly believe the turn of events. She had agreed to the marriage after long conversations with her family, without them knowing how much she desired the union. The other maidens in the village always ridiculed her whenever the topic of Omire came up among them, because she wasn't qualified to dream of him as her husband, because they were outcasts and not allowed to marry from the families of Omumbada. But now, everyone is begging her to marry him. If only they knew. She continued to think, as a small smile formed on her lips, unable to keep the joy hidden anymore. As the village elders blessed the union, the people of Umumbada watched in awe. The sun shone brightly overhead, and there was a sense that something powerful and unseen was shifting in the air. After the final blessing, Omire and Akugo stood before the village, hand in hand. The crowd erupted in cheers, and for the first time in years, there was a feeling of hope that spread through the village like wildfire. Later that evening, as the celebration continued, Omire found himself standing at the edge of the square, gazing at the sky. He felt a presence beside him and turned to see the figure of Anyanwu, the maiden who had visited him in dreams and in life. "You have done well," she said softly, her voice carrying on the breeze. "The curse is broken, the land will heal, and so will the people." Omire smiled, his heart lightened by her words. "Thank you, beautiful maiden. Without you, none of these would have been possible." Anyanwu's eyes shone brightly with kindness, and there was a hint of contentment in her expression. "My time here is over, Omire. You have restored balance, but the rest is up to you and your people." Before he could respond, she was gone, fading into the night like a whisper on the wind. As the celebration continued and the village rejoiced, Omire knew that the journey to healing had only just begun. But for the first time in a long time, the future looked bright. And so, the curse that had haunted the Mbada family and the village of Omumbada was lifted, and a new era of peace and prosperity began. The land flourished once more. Sons were born to families, and the bond between the Okafor and Okoli family grew stronger with each passing day. The families began to intermarry, and the Okoli family were no longer exempted from participating in the ceremonies and activities of the land. The village never forgot the lessons of the past, and they honored the truth that had set them free. Omire and Akugo's union became a symbol of hope and reconciliation, and through their strength, the village thrived. And as the years passed, the story of the curse, the false accusation, and the redemption that followed would be told for generations to come, ensuring the sins of the past would never again be repeated. And with that, my dear friends, our story comes to a close. But remember, the magic of storytelling lives on, waiting to whisk us away on new adventures, where the wonders of imagination know no bounds. Goodbye for now, and may your dreams be filled with joy, wonder, and endless possibility. Thank you so much for watching. Please kindly comment, like, share, and subscribe to our YouTube channel for more interesting stories.